It's time for Promoter 101, the podcast, hosted by Steiny.
Hey, this is Charlie from Crescent Ballroom, Stateside Present, and the new Van Buren Theater. I'll be a guest on Promoter 101 when I attend my first Polestar Live, and hopefully I'm alive to tell you all about it.
Welcome to Promoter 101, Episode 8. I'm Dan Steinberg.
And I'm Luke Pierce. Very excited about Episode 8 of Promoter 101. We're having a special guest this week join us for the news. Dave Brooks is the founder and editor of Amplify Media, the parent company of Amplify Magazine, breaking some of the most scintillating stories in the music business. Dave was the editor of Venues Today for 8 years before leaving in 2014 to start Amplify Magazine. And while Dave is a Bay Area native and a proud UC Santa Cruz slug, he's now down in Long Beach at the Amplify Media HQ with his beautiful wife, dog Bandit, and soon-to-be-born first child. Want to give a big welcome to the first time for this podcast, the New York Times Amplify Media editor, Mr. Dave Brooks. Dave, welcome.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on the podcast. I really like the show. Everything I heard so far, it's awesome.
Awesome to have you, man. Do you think you can lend some of your journalistic expertise today and help us out with the news?
Yeah, so the big story this week is Ray Waddell's surprise decision to leave Billboard magazine after 30 years.
This is a story that you actually broke, Dave, so congrats on that huge break there. Obviously, it's not great for Billboard. Their longtime figureheads leaving there, but I guess there's bigger questions about what he's actually going to be doing out there. Dan, you've known Ray and been at Billboard for quite some time. What are you thinking about this?
You know, I think there's a time there for some change in the atmosphere. Obviously, they tried something new by moving to the West Coast with the conference this year. I think it backfired for him a little bit. The conference was better in New York, and a lot of people just didn't come. So it seems like the shakeup is a good thing for Billboard. They're trying to find a way to stay relevant, and I don't think they are. I don't think they're relevant at all right now, and Ray's certainly respected by the industry. I think it's a big loss for them, but a new day and a chance to reawaken themselves.
Dave, this is a question that I ask myself a lot about these Oakview Group acquisitions. What is Ray actually going to be doing over there? What have you heard is going to be his role over at OVG?
So we know that he's going to be starting a conference. It's going to be tentatively in June or July of next year, Los Angeles. I'm hearing that it's going to be right around the weekend of the ESPYs, because the idea, Tim's talked about this a couple of times, is he wants a conference with a lot of the music, the big music guys like, the Azofs and Rapinos of the world, plus, but he also wants the sports people there. He wants the NHL commissioner, Gary Bettman, and the NBA's Adam Silver. So you kind of have all in the room talking about, arena touring shows and how they can make more money for the 22 arenas in the Arena Alliance.
As a journalist, Dave, that's got to be a really tough spot for Ray to maintain his integrity. It's going to be really tough for him to be independent of some of those interests. I mean, you're talking about some serious heavy hitters in Tim and Irving that are clearly competing against some other entities out there. So he's going to have to walk carefully. How can he manage those conflicts?
Well, so we're definitely expecting him to do some reporting, and when you're reporting, it's important to him to be an independent journalist and it's and neutral. And so, what I always tell people is the thing about bias is you don't look for it in the stories they write, because that's a little too obvious. No one's going to go out there and do the obvious bidding of someone else. It's the stories that you don't get written, stories that get killed behind the scenes. And so he's going to have to fight for a few stories that are going to ruffle some feathers. That is the first test he'll face.
Dave, Ray Waddell being free, I got to ask you, what do you think is going to happen with him and Liwiki? What are they going to do together?
Well, they're going to get back into the content business. So either they're going to launch their own company or they're going to acquire one. What I'm hearing in the rumor mills, they're actually looking at Venues Today, my old company. It's a print mag online. They have some events. They have database. So, if they buy that and try to brand it towards the Oakview Group and whatever they're working on, they're going to have some challenges, but I think they're thinking it's going to give them a leg up as opposed to starting from scratch.
Well, shit, that would make Venues Today relevant with Ray Waddell and Tim Liwiki involved, wouldn't it?
As crazy as that sounds, that seems like the direction things are going.
Dave, what else is happening out there in the world this week?
Well, sad news yesterday. Vince Egan, the founder of V Corp, and the man responsible for launching Sesame Street Live and the whole family show license category, passed away at the age of 74.
So this is big news because he didn't, first of all, didn't start Sesame Street. It was Sesame Street Live. You said that correctly, but I just want to definitely make the difference between he made that show a live touring entity and figured out how to bring that to the masses on the road and how to monetize it, really.
Yeah, he launched the show in Minnesota, and he actually sold 100,000 tickets, back in like 1980 when they did the show. They did a couple other dates, and it tanked. And, he was $500,000 in the hole, and he made a bet on taking the show, Sesame Street Live, to Madison Square Garden. He sold over 100,000 tickets on, 40 dates. And from there, he launched into the touring world. They went for 35 years.
His death comes at a time where V-Star, the company that was holding that, lost the Sesame Street contract, which it just proves how difficult it can be in that licensing world. You can talk about the successes of people like Jonathan Shank over at Red Light and the successes of people over at Feld, but this is really a cutthroat world out there.
Yeah, Feld won that contract. I think they put a very competitive offer in for it. When Egan retired, he sold it to a private equity group who then, changed leadership, put someone else in charge, and hey, it didn't really pay off. They lost their major license deal in the first year, so not exactly a great ROI.
It's a hit and miss world when it comes to kids shows. Some of them work and some of them don't. It's amazing. Sesame Street's a great entity and it's been a winning product forever, but there's so many bad kid shows out there that financially just never worked. Sesame Street was the first and one of the biggest and clearly put the kid shows on the touring map.
Well, Dan, what do people do wrong, you think? Like what makes some work and some not?
It's a gamble. You want something that's current. You want kids asking their parents to go. Parents don't really look for that moment of, what can I take my kid to see? It's more a matter of, what's my kid urging me to go see? My kid loves this, or they love this. There's Givens, Harlem Globetrotters, Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus, Disney's Ice Capades, Monster Trucks, all huge winners in the family space. But some of the cartoons and movies are only relevant in a very short time as kids are in that circle. Tours like Blue's Clues still on the road as the show's not current and the kids get older and they age out of it. Same thing with Yo Gabba Gabba was one of the hottest tours on the road 10 years ago. And as the kids have gotten older and the show isn't current anymore, it doesn't tour anymore. It's a matter of being current and having something kids really want to see for it to work.
Guy Series suffering the agony of Lafitte this week.
This week we learned that Ron Lafitte is leaving Maverick, but not Live Nation. So what's happening is that he's no longer part of Guy Series' Maverick Group, which was started in 2014 with 7 other managers. Instead, he's going to create his own standalone division at Live Nation under Artist Nation. So stepping away a bit, but still staying in the Live Nation family.
I don't know what this signals for this quote-unquote consortium model that Guy put together. This is like a little bit different than like the roll-up model that Scooter and Waddle Reed had created and their management side of things, where Scooter had gone out and made flat acquisitions into some of these businesses. This seemed like a merger of consolidated interests sharing across the board from all these different management companies. And I don't know if this is a crack in it or what it exactly means, what to read from it. I'm really curious to see how Lafitte continues to work in some capacity with some of these artists that are still at Maverick. And I say that for the sole reason that he's got Ryan Tedder and Ryan Tedder's publishing business, which is just gigantic and works across the board with a ton of artists out there. So I don't see it possible for him to fully exit that relation in some way. It's curious that he's going out and starting his own shop within the Live Nation family.
Well, that's interesting because there's been reports this week that Lafitte was never really that embedded with Maverick. Billboard even famously retweeted or re-Instagrammed a picture of Maverick taken in May with all the managers, and Lafitte was missing in action. So it wasn't ever clear how much he really bought into the whole concept.
So maybe it's not a complete unraveling of the consortium model. Maybe it's something that was just never meant to be from the beginning, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell. We do know that he came during contract renegotiations. He was basically re-upping his deal with Live Nation, so that's probably one of the things he asked for.
Well, I assume he's still taking Pharrell, still taking One Republic and Charlie Puth, stepping aside, and I'm excited to see what he does over there with Rapino.
All right, before I let you guys go, I got to ask you, Steiny, I'm hearing some whisperings out of Denver. Tell us about, this deal you're doing with Levitt Pavilion downtown.
Well, we're really excited about this. It's going to be the first outdoor amphitheater in the Denver proper area that's set up for it. So 7,500 cap right in the city of Denver. We're really excited about this. I'm looking forward to doing more shows in my hometown.
So you guys got the exclusive on booking this place. Isn't Denver a pretty competitive place? I mean, you got Fiddler's Green, Red Rocks, a lot of traffic there already.
They're great venues. Red Rocks is already booked up for every weekend as far as I can tell for 2017. So if you're coming through the market and you want an open date and you want to play a weekend in Denver, you're under 20,000 cap, we're the right play. I'm looking forward to this. Red Rocks is absolutely a great venue. I think that they both live in the market together, and we're excited about this.
The other thing I was reading about this venue is that there's going to be 50 free shows a year. What is that all about?
The Levitt Foundation has got venues across the country, and this is not the first one by far, but they're all about embracing the local music culture and getting people out to see the arts. So that's a big part of this. So there's going to be a lot of free shows. We're going to be involved with a bunch of that, but our side of it's really going to be the ticketing events and making sure that more arts come to the city proper. And I think good things are to come.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to opening next year, right?
Yeah, we're going to be open in the middle of summer and just full on swing from there. It's going to be great.
Big congrats to you and Zink, Steiny, and to everybody in the Emporium Denver office. It'll be servicing that. Becky and Aaron, everybody. So congrats to you all around. Looking forward to seeing some shows in Denver.
Big win for the team. We're excited. Thanks. It was great having you on the podcast this week, Dave. Thanks so much. It's great. Not only are you a voice for the industry that's young and energetic, but you certainly break news as if there's an industry that matters in a time-sensitive basis. It's something that the industry has lost for a long time. It's great to have it back.
Well, thanks. I really appreciate you saying that. I love doing it, and I love what you guys are doing with Promoter 101. It sounds great, and I love listening to it. So kudos to you, too.
Can we have you back soon?
Yes. Let me know. I'm here.
I appreciate it. Good luck with the baby. Have a great holiday, my friend.
Thanks, Steiny. And thanks, Luke.
Thanks, Dave. Let's take a moment and break down the ramblings and musings of Dan on Twitter. This is the section of the podcast each week where we spend time talking about the happenings of the music business through the hashtag Promoter101 lens. Those are the tweets made by Dan in the last week. If you're not following Dan already on Twitter, please be sure to do so. He's at the Jew on Twitter. All right, let's get started. When baby bands playing 175 cap club want to enforce their official tour all access passes, hashtag Promoter101.
Young bands acting like they're the real deal, wiring passes at venues without security even present at them. But what the hell? Live the dream. Live the dream, fellas.
Hey man, fake it till you make it, right? When a venue reports a show to Polestar that's sold way past their legal capacity, hashtag Promoter101.
This is amazing. The world's dumbest criminals. So it's a bad idea to break the law and oversell. It's even worse to report it to an industry magazine. I can't believe to begin how stupid people are. Don't oversell, and if you're going to break the law, don't fucking send it into a goddamn magazine to tell people about it.
You know what I'd be more worried about? I don't know if I'd be more worried about the law or agents and managers finding out that you're in a situation where you can sell over the capacity on your sheet. Because if that's the case, then I'm going to question everything that you send me back and forth, left and right, knowing that you full well could just stack more people than legally allowed into a certain room.
Of course, your competitors are going to have a field day with it.
100%. That's it for Promoter 101 tweets. Let's move on to the first interview of the week. We're excited to be joined by Bruce Kalmick of 888 Management of Austin, Texas. He's riding a series of successes at the moment, including Kaleo, the Josh Abbott Band, and Chase Rice. Dan had a chance to sit down with Bruce.
Bruce, thanks so much for joining us on Promoter 101. We're excited to have you.
Thanks for having me.
You've got an amazing roster. It's really rare to see a manager have acts both working on the countryside and the alternative rock side simultaneously. It's like you guys in Q Prime are making a new field there.
Yeah, I guess so.
Making Doc McGee proud, I think, right there.
I think John Peets has me beat by quite a bit right now, but yeah, I appreciate that.
A little bit more gray hair in his head for it, though. He's got a couple of years on you, but I imagine some of your bands might get to that arena level just yet.
That would be great, yeah.
So you started out as an early entrepreneur from like grade school days?
As early as I can remember, owning a business and running my own world was important to me. And I think it, mainly came from my father and my grandfather. They owned their own businesses, selling remodeling jobs or siding or a number of things. But I kind of settled into the landscaping field at an early age because it was accessible. And I did everything you can imagine, from raking leaves and washing cars and babysitting. At I think 12 or 13, I was riding my bike, my 10-speed down the road with my trailer was a red wagon, and behind that was the lawnmower, and I mowed 10 or 15 yards a month and laid tile and built compost and babysit and trained young kids in soccer and anything I could think of to make my own money. So
Kind of a Renaissance man at the age of 12.
I thought I was pretty far behind the curve, even then. I still feel like that as we sit here today. Like, I always feel like I've yet to do anything with my life. And even at 10, 11, 12 years old, it felt like if I'm not making my own money, I'm really not participating in this world. So I wouldn't say it was all like financially driven, but I think a good part of it was to get out of the situation that I was in. Money was going to certainly help.
Your dad was involved with remodeling kitchens. Is that how you learned how to lay tile?
Yeah, I was always around it. As early as I can remember, they would pay me $10 to go clean up remodeling jobs. When they tore it all apart, I'd walk through there and pick up all the trash. And, that led to, on the weekends, going out with some of the construction managers and living in an RV for a weekend and cleaning jobs. I get paid. And I was in the third grade.
Now, how did you work that into music?
I guess sometime in high school, I started working with a band, a high school band that was doing quite well around, Houston and specifically Sugar Land. They were popular guys, and, everyone in the school came out. It would make a 500-person venue look full really quick, and, so on and so forth. It snowballed. And there were 7 or 8 people in the production company. It was called Data Fade Productions. And we were all managers of the band in some capacity, and I managed the marketing efforts for Data Fade Productions, which was essentially one act, but there was some idea that we were going to sign other acts, and maybe there were a couple other things. It was it was a rap rock band, and it was in the moment before Swishahouse really took off and Paul Wall, Chameleonaire, and Slim Thug broke, but No Limit Records was on fire. They'd put out an album every week, and they'd sign any kid with some sneakers and tie sock and a flow. They'd make a record, so No Limit was signing every artist in Houston and selling music in all the records and tape shops around Houston, which is still a thing. So we sort of patterned our company after No Limit Records.
And No Limits, that would be considered pretty gangster rap, right?
Big time. Yeah, no, I was the preppy white kid from the suburbs going to Chocolate Town on the weekends, and
most likely to cut a bitch in a settlement, I think. Yeah.
I'm surprised you know about that. It only happened once. But yeah, I'll do it.
Not to be fucked with. Excellent. You'd made a joke about those were your Mad Dog 2020 days.
Yeah, I mean, that's when you learn how to do everything at that age. And it just so happened that my first sip of alcohol was either an old E40 or a Mad Dog 2020. I can't remember. I watched Paul Wall sell records out of the back of his Civic. They hustled, and a lot of things they did I certainly didn't learn from, but all of those guys were true hustlers, and I still use those principles today when we market artists, when we set up grassroots campaigns. I never even thought about radio until way later in my career.
So putting asses in seats. And this was all before college, right?
Yeah, all before college.
So you were the first one in your family, on your side of the family anyway, to go to college.
Nobody even thought about college. Matter of fact, the day I left, my dad begged me not to go. My mom didn't graduate high school. My dad barely graduated high school. Neither of them went to any college at all. My dad, jumped right into, his struggling ownership of multiple different remodeling companies in multiple different cities. But I wanted it. I went after it. I got in. I did everything on my own. I think when most kids were really leaning on their parents to help them get through that process, I had very little to no help. But I got into a few schools and figured out how to pay my way.
So school was secondary to you while you were studying, right? It was still about the music biz to you.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. The first few years of college, it was about entrepreneurship. Music was still something that I was thinking about, but it wasn't my focus. My focus was starting every organization I possibly could while I was in school, playing on the soccer team, running the fraternity, whatever it was. There was always some element of entrepreneurship.
And what fraternity were you in?
Pi Kappa Phi.
Did you wind up running for office?
I held every office except president.
Okay, so let's talk about your first management client.
I guess it depends on how you look at it. I mean, technically, it was a band called Ferkloven, these super smart UT kids that my now wife's family had some connection to, and they knew that I loved music and had an entrepreneurial spirit, and they said, you should manage them. I met with them. I started managing them. We put up shows immediately, and we sold out, all the little 300-seaters, and we were developing a business. Those kids, they were really good. I think there was definitely some talent there. I have to go dig up that album. It's, 15 years old now, but two of them are doctors now. They were all a little too smart to be in a band.
You booked Randy Rogers' first gig ever.
First gig ever, yeah. It was actually IFC thing. We were throwing a lot of fundraisers for the Interfraternity Council, and somebody was like, oh, you should come check out this band. They've never played a show, but they play in my garage or whatever. I think it was another fraternity. And I went and checked him out, and it was this guy, Randy Rogers, and he had a band, which is not the band that he has today, which is, equal members. So I booked him on the show.
As a college student, you passed on Randy Rogers.
I did, yeah. And Randy and I are still pretty good friends, and it comes up every once in a while.
Is that bragging rights or how stupid am I kind of rights?
I believe everything happens for a reason. So if I had started working with him, one of two things would have happened. One, I knew absolutely dog shit about being a manager. So Randy Rogers then may have never become Randy Rogers' band, and maybe they never exist, which would be a shame. Or two, I would have made him into a pop act. I don't know. So maybe it's the best thing for him.
You moved on into starting to do middle agent work.
There was an agency called AUE, and they booked Randy Rogers, Stoney LaRue, Cross Canadian Ragweed, Pat Green, Corey Morrow, etc. Like, they were significant. And that agency is now called John Folk and Chad Kadelka's agency. What's it? Red 7? Red 11?
Red 11.
Well, Chad was sort of running AUE at the time, and I kid you not, I faxed, mailed, called, and emailed my resume, and I got no response. I did go get some terrible job working for a middle buyer named Ron something, and I started middle buying dates for Molly Hatchet, Leon Russell, and David Allen Coe, and you name it. And I probably had conversations with you at the time. I'm almost positive I had my first conversation with Henry Glasscock when he was promoting shows back then. I worked there for a minute and left, called my friend who was the lead singer of the band that I, managed in high school. I'm on Polestar. I think we can do this on our own. Do you want to start a booking agency? We met on a Sunday at Outback Steakhouse in San Marcos, wrote out a business plan. And on Monday, instead of going to take the job that I got, I went and started KB Talent, which directly competed against AUE of all things, which I begged them to hire me, and I was going to make $0, and they'd never responded. So I started.
So you and Outback Steakhouse took on these guys.
Not Outback Talent, that's for sure. Yeah, it was Outback Steakhouse.
But that was the start of it all.
Yeah, Ricky Brown and I started KB Talent. It was Kalmick and Brown. And we signed everything under the sun, including a band called Under the Sun, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, so and you guys were continuing to middle dates at the same time with acts like Leon Russell.
Yeah, so we became friendly with the guy that was booking all the Leon Russell dates at the time. We became agents for Leon in a sense, but we were still middling them. Same with David Allen Coe, Molly Hatchet. And we would sell a couple, honestly, probably 2 or 3 a month, but it was enough for us to think that we were actually doing something. And in the meantime, we signed dozens of bands in every genre you can think of. Heavy metal, rap, rock, country, religious. And then, we were big Texas music fans. To use Randy Rogers again, at this point, he was opening every Roger Krager show he could. He wasn't even headlining just yet in Texas.
This is what year, give or take, in your life? What?
2005, early
Okay.
2005.
Okay.
So the new wave of Texas music hadn't happened yet. We love this stuff. We started signing some of it, and that sort of created a little bit more of a tunnel for us. And we slowly shed out all of the indie rock, heavy metal cover bands, and about a year later, that our focus became basically Texas music.
So, Bruce, you wound up getting involved with Josh Abbott and Whiskey Myers, two actually still work with, right?
Yep. Still work with them in 10 years. Yeah.
And the story with Whiskey Myers, how that came to be, is fascinating. Can you tell that story?
I just signed Josh Abbott. I decided to move away from booking, kept KB Talent for a little bit, but I was sort of done with it. I had enough money set aside to take the leap, and Ricky and I decided to start managing, and the first artist that I signed was the Josh Abbott Band. And then maybe 2 or 3 weeks later, Jason Kane called me and said, hey, have you heard of this band? And we were becoming friends, so he was trying to help. he said, have you heard of this band, Whiskey Myers? And I said, no, but I'm going to check it out. So I go on MySpace. I listened to the album, which is their first album, Road of Life. And I love Southern rock, and it was great. I was hooked. So I got a hold of the guitar player, John Jeffers, and said, I'd love to meet with you guys. I'm interested in managing you. They kind of knew who KB Talent was at the time. Like, we had a name in Texas for sure as an agency. They were in my office by 2 p.m. the next day, and I signed them. We started managing Whiskey Myers in that moment 10 years ago. Well, about a week goes by, and I'm guns blazing at this point on Whiskey Myers. And Jason calls me to talk about whatever rodeo stuff, and he says, hey, whatever happened with Whiskey Falls? And I was like, Whiskey Falls? You said Whiskey Myers. I looked them up on MySpace. They were in my office the next day, and I signed them. And he's like, oh, shit, no, I meant Whiskey Falls, band from Georgia that was kind of happening that signed a deal with Sony in Nashville. And, of course, they never happened.
So a completely different band, and you found them on MySpace. That's the genius of that.
That's right. Yeah, 10 years later, they're doing all right.
It's going to take a lot to one-up that. You got to find a band off of Friendster. It's amazing.
I did sign a band from Iceland. So, I mean, that was kind of the one-up.
We're going to get to that in a second. Those guys are doing pretty good. Let's talk about the company developed and things were going and your dad wound up getting into the World Series of Poker, and that actually helped further your career somehow.
It was actually before the management element started, but there were all those moments in time which, existed up until probably 4 or 5 years ago where I'm out of money, I'm leveraged to the tilt, I've got to move on, I've got to do something else, this isn't right for me, my family, etc. Pre-family, but in 2005, my dad got into the World Series of Poker. I'd never been to Vegas. I went to Vegas. All my friends came with. We rolled through the trade show, went to the Bodog booth. I probably had $100 to gamble with, and that was going to put me in even more debt at the time. But I did the free raffle on the Bodog booth, and I won an extra ticket to the raffle. So I put 2 tickets in there to win this Harley Davidson. A couple weeks later.
The raffle was what?
It was a Bodog trade show.
Okay, sure.
Bodog was a big casino website.
Okay.
Huge. Canadian. And they were giving away a Harley Davidson. You put the raffle in. You do that a million times, you're never going to win. And a couple weeks later, I was with family, and Ricky called me. He's like, dude, someone from Bodog just called and said you won a Harley Davidson. I was like, fuck that. That can't be real. I'll call him later or whatever. And the guy was persistent. I get back to the office, which was our apartment, and I get on the phone with him, and I run him through the ringer. I'm like, okay, what am I paying for? What's the catch? Taxes? Do I have to go pick it up? A number of things. And they're like, no, we're delivering it to your front door for free. Gift tax. You won a Harley. I mean, just free and clear.
I love that you won a bike and you're asking them about the taxes. I don't know if I should take this. I might have to pay the taxes on it.
Yeah, no, I was worried about all that stuff. So by the time that the bike arrived, Bodog was a massive website. I think it was the #1 online casino. They ended up flying in a photographer and a guy to interview me. This is on the internet somewhere. Well, Bodog, I think, got shut down or whatever, but they did this whole story on me as a booking agent and a gambler, but I wasn't really a gambler, but they fluffed this whole story. So there was some press about it, but I won this Harley. They delivered it to my front door. I sold it before it ever arrived. It was $15,000 or $20,000. Had that not happened, I don't think I'd keep going with the agency.
You were thinking about leaving the business to the point where you actually studied and took the LSATs.
Yeah, I mean, it was, the odds of starting your own business in the music field, not real good. Took the LSAT prep course. I got about halfway through it seriously, and then I can't 100% remember what the moment was, but I think we had booked some Brandon Ryder dates for, 1,000 a pop, 6, 7, 8, 9 dates. We made like $1,000 in one afternoon, and I felt like we were on our way. So I stopped caring about the LSAT. I did take it, scored well enough to get into a couple minor schools in Texas, but I'd never even sort of pursued that.
Okay, so you've got the money from the motorcycle. You're moving on. You're not going to law school. You decide to kill the booking side and focus on management.
Yeah, it was 2007. Killed the booking, went to management, focused all of my time and energy. I mean, I was still booking the bands I was managing, Josh Abbott, Whiskey Myers, and I built them from the ground up.
And
literally.
You're just hustling a living at this point, just everything you can to make ends meet until it kicks in a little heavy.
Totally. There were 4 or 5 or 6 agents at KB Talent that were barely getting by, but they're working hard. And I was focused on breaking the management side. And we started doing everything you do as a manager, but learning ourselves. Nobody ever taught me how to do literally anything. I mean, I don't think you could even consult Google to help you understand the world. I read the Donald Passman. I used the Donald Passman contract. I think I literally Xeroxed it out of there for a booking agency. We were a little more legit on the booking side at that point. I mean, we had our own contract and we had a pretty good administration at that point. But on the management side, I knew what I was doing because I understood the business well enough to get going, but it was a trial by fire.
Well, it's the entrepreneurial spirit that this industry is built on, and it seems to have always been inside of you to begin with. So management seemed to take off and you started to make a living, started to happen, and some of the big guys were coming after you.
Yeah, I guess about 5 or 6 months in, I got a call from the guy that I would consider my mentor in this business, Joey Lee, sneaking around asking about Whiskey Myers. And, I didn't really put two and two together, but he was trying to steal the band away from me. I think he offered some support shows with Miranda or Randy. Maybe it was Randy because he was at 360 Artists at the time. I think it was Randy dates or something. Of course, I wanted those, and I had let him know pretty quick, like, hey, I'm their manager, which he didn't realize, and quickly moved them to 360 Artists. Josh Abbott followed suit shortly after, and I started working with Joey. And at that point, I'd been to Nashville many times, but I was working in the sewers. And Joey, he basically opened up his door to me and introduced me to everybody he could.
And for those of you that don't know, Joey Lee is rock royalty in Nashville. His parents were Buddy Lee Attractions, and he came up as a super agent under them, learning from literally as a kid up, and now he has Miranda as at William Morris Endeavor as one of the senior guys and has been looked up to for years in the biz, is who you're referring to.
That's right, yeah. So I started working with Joey on those two acts, and it was really Henry Glasscock that was booking
the Crystal
them.
Pistol. We love Henry.
Crystal Pistol. He was brand new to the booking world at that point, too, and now known as the Techspert in that William Morris building. I think I taught him about 75% of what he knows about
the
Texas.
Techspert, I love that term. Does he accept that as his monarch,
Yeah.
the Techspert?
I don't know if they're really calling him that anymore, but he certainly dominates the pockets of Texas that most people don't even think about. That we were on the phone 6 times a day going through every little venue honey hole that you could make money in. It was an anomaly. It wasn't like the rest of the country. You could make money in, I don't know, we have 40 cities we can make money in, and it's a big state, but we can make real money in 35 or 40 cities, and he absolutely dominated.
Amazing. So guys like Irving Azoff are calling for you. Ken Levitan, you had the whole top layer of the industry looking after you, trying to get you. Shortly
after, I think we put out one Josh Abbott record, Scapegoat. On the next album, the She's Like Texas album, of course, I have nobody helping me put out albums, so we put out the album ourselves.
So you're playing record label on top of being manager and booking some of your bands.
Totally. To me, even today, as a manager, you're top down. Like, your job is to do whatever is needed, and I never really thought of it as being a record label. I have, it was announced a couple weeks ago, I do co-own an actual major imprint, but I never really desired that. But to me, it was like, this is a void in the artist's career, and I'm going to fill it one way or the other. So I just figured it out, and figured it out in a pretty big way, because we had a first week on that album of 24,000 and change, and it sparked a lot of interest in Josh and in me. And Josh's attorney, who Joey connected me with, was Jess Rosen, and Jess and I started working together, and Jess sort of took a little bit of interest in me and rolled it into a lot. I think Corin was the first phone call. It might have been Irving Azoff. I can't remember which one of them called first, but Jess then rolled it all up, and like everybody was after me at the time. This was 2011, 12. I was probably just at that moment making a little bit of money. Still not much, but I don't know, call it $70,000, $80,000 maybe at the time, working 70, 80 hours a week. But so Irving, Corin, Levitan got involved. I went to Irving's, yearly management meetings in Vegas. I met all the Vector people, and I was prepared to do a deal that would partner me with Levitan and Irving Azoff.
Not a bad place to be in this industry for a guy that was just barely making it.
That's right. Yeah, no, I was pumped.
So why didn't it happen?
A couple of reasons. One, the deal would have put me in a situation where I was basically owned by Live Nation or Red Light or whoever else it was for a pretty long period of time. And there was an upfront check that was nice. But even though I was still prepared to do the deal, and I got sort of a late night call from one of these guys, and he told me not to do the deal. And he eventually left the company, and I would have lost the guy that I was most interested in following, in Irving Azoff. Still friendly with Irving, and certainly his son, and his family's amazing. And he's an absolute legend. And that was kind of the path that you can't not look up to what he has done in his career. So even if
I mean, the guy was behind Fast Time in Ridgemont High, for God's sakes. He's a legend.
Yeah, even if I could get that 1% of his time a year, I felt like that would be enough for me to take a pretty giant step in my career. And then on top of that, Ken Levitan was such a big part of the acquisition too. And again, you can't help but look at what he's done in his career and think, if I'm studying under a guy like that, let's call him the professor, I can't lose, because my motivation, I'm young, I'm hungry, I'm going to go get this. With their 1% from Irving and 10% from Ken, you won't be able to stop me. So Irving...
No, which is all genius. It should have happened. It should make total sense, and it didn't.
I got a call randomly from Brian Hill, agent at CAA now. He was at Paradigm at the time. And he said, you should meet with George Corey. And my honest response was, I don't think that's going to work. I haven't had a good experience with the guy. He kind of treated us poorly on an airplane one time on the way to Nashville. We're both in Austin. It made sense, but, we're in the same city. He's never reached out to me. I didn't get a good response from him on certain things. I was adamantly against it, but I said, Brian and I weren't working together either. But I had a lot of respect for him even then. And he's become a very, 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 very close friend now. I said, out of respect to you, I will. And George was in my office the next day at like 7 a.m. And we were supposed to sit down and sort of go through the concept of it for a few minutes or whatever, maybe an hour. And we ended up, that meeting lasted until noon. We sat there for 4 or 5 hours together. And it was so obvious to me. I had 7 or 8 people in my management company. He had 7 or 8 people in his company. We were both focused on doing more for the artist and developing something a little bit different than some of those folks that were chasing each of us. Because George had some of those same encounters. He comes from the C3 world, though. So he already had experienced some corporate management stuff, and I don't think it worked out too well there. So he started 888-8808. So it was a few years later that him and I, after that meeting, kind of jumped in, and that was 4 years ago. We're doing all right.
George, well known for being Eli Young's manager, as well as many other bands that got great reputations in the country world.
Yep.
So you guys are together. You guys now have an Austin office. You've got Nashville office, and now a new label you've taken on with 30 Tigers that you've partnered up with. So things seem to be happening. Let's talk about the current day with Joe Nichols, Josh Abbott, Kaleo, Chase Rice, the Cadillac 3, the Wind and the Wave, Whiskey Myers, the Brinks. Like, it goes on. Like, you guys are all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, the first 2 artists that we signed when we merged 4 years ago, Chase Rice and Sam Hunt. And those that know the Sam Hunt story, I'll leave it at that. But, we had our eye and our focus on breaking things in a new way, the way that, we've been doing it for years. We didn't rely on radio to break the Josh Abbott Band. George certainly didn't rely on radio for the Eli Young Band. That certainly did happen for them, but it was well on its way before that in terms of a career and a business. And we did the same thing with Chase, and we did the same thing with Sam. We didn't go straight to radio. We looked at every other vertical. We wanted to break them, create a consumer base, and then push the radio button at the right moment. And certainly radio has played a big role in both of their careers, and we practice that across the board. Ryan Hurd now, really, we're only on Spotify right now, and it's designed. We want to build a consumer base, push the radio button at the right moment so that our artists don't become slaves to radio.
You guys have an interesting moment now where your success had been in the country world for the most part, but now you go and sign this band from Iceland, as you talked about earlier, Kaleo. They're rocking across the alternative world, and the radio is just eating them up, and so is the online music scene. The guy's not bad to look at, and they're filling rooms because they can sing, and he's got a voice on him. I mean, God gave with both hands with this kid.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, before Kaleo, though, the Cadillac 3, for example, they're more of a rock band than they're ever going to be a country band. Jaron has 7 number ones in country and is one of the most prolific writers on the planet, but they're a rock band. They were called American Bang. They just changed their name and sort of took a step into country music when we signed them. We signed them, I think I signed them just before George and I merged 4.5, 5 years ago or whatever. That band's doing, over $1 million in touring plus whatever other business. That was all without country radio. They're signed to Big Machine. Well, we've got a sold-out Shepherd's Bush show next week. They're exploding in the UK market, and they're starting to really happen in the German market, Netherlands. All of that as a rock band. They're not a country act. I was sure that the Whiskey Myers thing was a rock band, not a country thing. some people may call them country, but they're Southern rock at the core. Like, it's always been a part of who I am. And I think George sort of lends himself to more of the up the middle country stuff with, at the time, Kevin Fowler and Joe Nichols and Eli Young, Jack Ingram when we merged. But I'm a fan of all music. I never look up and say, I was the best country music manager. I wanted to look up and say I was a good manager at the end of the day. So the Kaleo thing was not a stretch by any means. And by the way, they're kind of a Southern rock act. But I got
certainly soulful.
Very soulful, very Southern for a band from one of the most northern countries in the world. Nothing atmospheric about their music at all. But I got a song I was completely mesmerized by, more than a record, but by a band. There was a few videos, and I looked at Kayla, my assistant. I said, I had no clue. I was like, how do I get to Iceland? I assumed 25 hours, whatever, but I was prepared to do it. I was in New York, and I had to be in Boston for the start of Chase's tour 2.5 years ago at House of Blues. So, I was right there. It was a 5-hour flight, booked a flight, started Skyping with him probably 3 or 4 times. It was ice cold over there, like ice cold at the time. It was October, November. I started talking to him like September and flew over to Iceland, which is completely new territory for me, and went to their little rehearsal studio, and it was everything that I already knew. They were incredible, even at their worst, which they thought they were that night. They put up a little show in a 300-seater in downtown Reykjavik, and I've never gone to church. I'm Jewish, but I understood church at that time. I'm serious. Like, I felt the entire show like, this is what people think when they're standing in church, that gospel moment when they raise their hand, which I've never understood. I was in that moment, and I knew what we had, and it's been pedal to the metal from that moment forward. They, of course, signed a deal with 888. I got them a record deal and publishing deal and a large sum of cash, immigrated them down the street. They literally lived in my suburb in Lakeway, and they're on a roll.
And this vision of you, like in the Blues Brothers, standing next to both of them, like in that church scene, just like, we're on a mission from God. We're putting the band back together, like just finding it. It's awesome.
It felt like that undeniable moment in my career. Like, you have those moments where you're standing on stage and you see 10,000 people sing the words back. We were doing well, It's not like, Sam was on fire, Chase on fire. Things were going well. And then I discovered the thing that will, I think, change my life forever. The rest of it is huge. There's no doubt. But it took me so far outside of what everybody considered the norm for what we were doing. And, it's exciting.
Well, you guys have certainly got an amazing amount of things going on. Lately, you've been spending your time between having amazing shots with your son Wyatt, hang out with all of your bands, and even performing with them now, if I've heard correctly.
He's played with Chase and the Cadillac 3 and Kaleo and Josh Abbott. Played accordion with Josh Abbott at Jab Fest a few weeks ago. That was pretty funny. He's a big fan of music. Between Chase and the Cadillac 3 and Kaleo, not only does he love the music, but those guys have all embraced him in such a big way. Like, he's got like a million uncles in his life. So.
Seems like he's having a good time. He's always smiling. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time to talk to us today on Promoter 101. Thanks for taking the time, Bruce.
Thank you.
Our next guest is known for his cutting-edge, tech-savvy mind from the legendary New Music Tip Sheet, the great Scott Perry. This week on Promoter 101, we take a look at the tech world and how the music industry interacts with us. Joining us is expert Scott Perry. Thanks for being here, Scott.
Thanks for having me, Dan. Appreciate it, man.
Scott, you're kind of the nerd on call when it comes to the industry. Is it fair to call you a nerd or a tech geek?
Oh, no, it's totally fine. I'll be the first to admit there are a lot more people that are more IT/tech savvy and, roll up their sleeves and do the day-to-day stuff. But, from where I stand, I really take pride in being able to, see trends and help, companies, clients, businesses, and industries see where the ball is going so they can adjust their businesses accordingly. And, if not wholeheartedly commit to a trend, at least, dip their toes in the water so they're not caught off guard if one of these, little things happen to take off a year or two down the line.
Scott, you definitely came from the music world, and now you've transitioned into tech. Is there a real tech culture that happens outside the Silicon Valley?
Oh, yeah, totally. It's like I was deeply involved in the music industry for 20 years, And then for the past couple of years, I've been really enmeshed in Los Angeles' tech scene, because for all the time that LA has been in San Francisco's shadow, there's a real ecosystem that's developing here in Los Angeles, and a lot of these companies are taking root. And as goes California, so does the rest of the world. And some of it's a lot of like self-important hype that blows away, and some of these things actually stick and turn into real businesses on which other companies can create a business. I tend to liken when YouTube built out their YouTube space down in Playa Vista here, it's almost like a GM plant being built, and all of a sudden you have all these parts suppliers along the highway who are like feeding into that ecosystem. So LA has always been natural for, video entertainment for, the past 100 years with movies and TV and whatnot. But because YouTube established a studio space here in Los Angeles, it really helped play as a magnet for agencies, ad agencies, talent, producers, and all these people that feed into that system and profit from it. So, that's just one example of how, little things take root, turn into big things.
So it's a new day and you've moved away from the tip sheet, but it's kind of what you're known for. What's happened with that?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I don't do the tip sheet anymore because between streams and music players and all that, there's not really a need for it. It was weird that like when I started New Music Tip Sheet, some 10 or 12 years ago, that the pre-existing trades did not have all the listings for all the American releases, because New Music Tip Sheet listed almost every single new release from almost every single label on one site. And,
You are the cheat sheet. You made it so we didn't have to do any other research, and now it's gone.
And now you have to go through each distributor's B2B site and hopefully get a grid together, and then you have these last-minute drops and all that. But because nobody else is doing it, not Hits, not Album Network, not R&R, or Billboard, oddly enough, I was able to carve out a niche and charge advertising against that. And in the first couple of years, it was just a really dry Excel spreadsheet with some pretty album covers around it. And as I built up the mailing list, I started to discover my own voice, in which the Monday morning emails would go out with, those releases, but I also preface it with whatever it is I saw from where I stood, being inside the music industry, but not so deeply enmeshed where I could actually have the freedom to talk about things without fear of repercussion. It wasn't like I wasn't really any trade secrets, but if I saw something that didn't quite sit right, I would say something about it. If I saw something that I thought was fascinating, I'd say something about it. I was one of the first people to actually talk about Twitter to the music industry back when you'd have to access Twitter by texting 40404. I was on Instagram in the first month, and I was like amongst the first 400,000 users, and I thought I was behind the eight ball on that. But, a lot of artist managers came on board with it, and then they kind of gave me flack because they were on there, but nothing was happening, And so it's like, you dip your toes in these things. It takes a little while to take hold. But you know what? Once it does take hold, at least you already have a presence there. So you're not trying to grab your username, which may already be taken by a 12-year-old fan. And, you just start to build your base. And then, of course, as each social media platform has come around over the years, you find that it's easier to build upon a new platform when you have a pre-existing platform to draw from. So if you have a huge email list, you can send people over to Facebook. If you have a huge Facebook list, you can send them over to Instagram. If you have a huge Instagram list, there's a possibility they might have gone to Twitter back in the day, and then all these things play out as what works. When Pinterest was starting to take hold, people were going, well, should we use Pinterest to reach out to these young, aspirational, millennial females and their mothers to promote this show and all that? You experiment with these things, you see what works, you see what doesn't work, and if it doesn't work, you move on. But you have to test this because there's obviously a buzz around it. And so, when these platforms would come around, I would try and help out as best I can to illuminate what was happening with that.
So you're an early adopter on social media. You jumping into those new platforms as soon as they exist, right?
Oh, my God, yeah. Yeah, I mean, you have to think about all the artists who, at least with Twitter, you could get a verified name. And if whomever had it wasn't that person's name, then, they'd take it back from that person. Like, when I first started using Twitter, whenever in the early days, whenever I'd want to test a platform, I would always use the username Al Roker. And so I actually had Al Roker's Twitter account for the first 3 or 4 years, because that way I could I could fly under the radar and just use it without anybody noticing that Scott Perry was doing this or whatever. And it was good strategically until Twitter unceremoniously took that name away from me and gave it to NBC, as well they rightfully should, but their communications process was pure shit. I mean, it's like here you have a faithful user who's been using it in good faith without any type of like ill will. And then you wake up one morning and it's gone. And then you have to email customer service and they're like, oh, this is in violation of the terms. I'm like, what terms? They're like, okay, well, we have this thing called verified username. Like, whatever, so these, and again, with these small companies, they have to learn this stuff as well. It's like, if you're going to make a change to your policy, how is that communicated to your users properly so they understand the rules and aren't shocked when these big changes come about. So, there's always something going on.
So this is like the Apple user agreement that we all just sign our lives away to without ever reading it, right?
Exactly. Didn't you read that in like that 8-point font, 20 pages down? And it's like, oh, I didn't read that. We never read those things. Whatever. It's okay. It's no big deal. But, I've also, Oliver Luckett, who ran The Audience, which was a big Facebook marketing agency, recently was talking about how he got in trouble with Facebook because he was making jokes with a buddy of his and made some tiny weenie joke and it sent the guy a JPEG of a tiny weenie, micro penis, I think is what it was. And he got flagged for sending child pornography. And Oliver looks at the picture, the source picture, looks at the name and everything. It's like, no, this is a micro penis of a 60-year-old man. This is not child pornography. But he had no immediate means of defending his position to get his own account back. So, as these social media platforms become more responsible in their duties to either, block offensive stuff or filter out what may be fake news, there has to be a mechanism to communicate between the user and the platform so that they can defend themselves in case something comes up. Because, imagine how much time you put into a social platform and it's taken away just like that with, little or no notice. Anyway, we're going off on a tangent here, but there's so much stuff going on with this. Let's talk about the future.
Let's talk about LA Tech Digest for a second, Scott.
Well, the crazy thing is, LA's tech scene has been growing exponentially in the past couple of years. And LA has long been in the shadows of San Francisco's tech scene, two different animals altogether. But what's really come to be is LA is discovering its own, coming into its own and discovering its own identity. And so we've built up a lot of companies recently, and they're starting to take hold. And what I noticed was LA's business publications were not making note of that. Being a student of history myself and, having numerous books on, LA's growth and, the history of Venice and all these things that happened around here 100 years ago, I noticed nobody was really chronicling that as it was happening. And so in the past couple of years, LA has gone from an early stage town, putting seed level and angel level money into companies, into a later stage town where a lot of companies are getting funded now, are getting what's called A's and B's and C's, even a D level. So there's a lot of money coming into Los Angeles right now. And with that comes a lot of opportunity. And with that money and opportunity is also a lot of chaos because from the outside looking in, Los Angeles is this huge, massive geographical behemoth with no rhyme or reason to it. But once you actually break it down and understand what LA is all about, it's basically 111 distinct neighborhoods all cobbled together. And outsiders don't necessarily understand that, Beverly Hills, West Hollywood, Santa Monica, Culver City are their own municipalities that are independent of Los Angeles. But, places like Venice, Koreatown, Chinatown, downtown are Los Angeles. Hollywood is Los Angeles. So what I aim to do with LA Tech Digest was to chronicle the scene as it was happening and to be able to break down and show people what's going on here. And LA itself is not a tech town, but technology affects every single pre-existing industry in the area. So, whether it's manufacturing, distribution, videos, video games, commerce, it's all like really coming together. And more than anything, LA's understanding itself as the intersection of entertainment and commerce. And our mayor, Eric Garcetti, is doing a really good job of being like our biz dev in chief and drawing in new industry from around the world, making LA the capital of the Pacific Rim and luring in Asian investment dollars and luring in Asian business. It's just been fascinating around here. And so I created LA Tech Digest as a means to chronicle all that's going on. But unfortunately, as a blog, it doesn't make any money. So I've actually scaled back on maintaining the site itself and doing a lot more with like posts on Medium, related news via Twitter. But more than anything, doing the deep dive into LA Tech Digest has really enmeshed me into LA's tech scene proper. So I have access to city government, where I have access to the startups, where I have access to the heads of Fortune 500 companies and other well-funded businesses around here. I mean,
You have all this access to these amazing resources and people. That's amazing that your city has been developing that way and has been behind that creatively. How are you using it?
you connect the dots. As an entrepreneur, and believe me, I've actually looked for jobs in the real world, and I do tend to find that my place tends to be as the consultant or an outsider who's actually bringing people together to make things happen. A lot of my bread and butter comes from film and TV marketing. I actually market a lot of comic book related TV shows, to those potential audiences. Just as like the NFL will market to football fans, I tend to take shows like Supergirl, Big Bang Theory, X-Files, Scorpion, etc., and market those to comic book fans. And as digitally inclined as I am, I have deep roots in indie retail. In fact, I was Don Van Cleve's right-hand man at the Coalition of Independent Music Stores during the earlier days.
Nice.
I still believe that in a digital world, human connection is paramount. It's so important. And I actually have a network of 250 comic book shops in the top 50 DMAs with which I work on a regular basis to promote these properties, because you're always going to have your agency of record do your radio, billboard, outdoor print. You're going to have your digital agency, like run your ads on Facebook. You're going to drop a YouTube video that gets 19 million views in 24 hours, which as a little guy, I can't compete against that. I'm not trying to compete against that, but you need that layer, that glue to bring it all together and to reinforce to that fan that you are going to want to see the show. You are going to watch this movie. You are going to want to spend your time and money to go to an event. These days in the digital world, it is so easy to drop a movie trailer and get 20 million views, like Beauty and the Beast, Star Wars, Valiant, all these amazing tentpole films out there. But you still need trusted resources, which are the comic book shops, talking to a target audience, which are those customers, on a regular basis to say, hey, this is pretty cool.
So nerds are considered a higher bred audience, right? Because they all have really good jobs. They're smart, so they make good money. And they're getting laid a lot, so they're going out and spending their money on things that aren't girls, right? So that's got to be a bread and butter demo for you.
The thing is, though, that demographic is always painted as such. But if you go to Comic-Con, if you go to any of these regional cons, you'll see that, nerds are pretty sexy. Like the whole cosplay thing where guys and girls get dressed up in their favorite outfits. Yowzers, there's some crazy stuff out there, and it's hot. And also...
Nerds are pretty sexy. Awesome.
Yes, they are. And also that whole thing about,
Spoken from a man with an awesome Jew fro. It's just fitting, buddy. I love it.
Well, the crazy thing is also, people tend to think of nerds as, single guys who have, their Mountain Dew and their video games, and they watch some movies and all that. But actually... the stores that I work with, they'll send me pictures on a regular basis of their customers, during these promotions, and they're just regular people. They're mom and pop with their kids coming in, and what kills me is how these kids have access to so much great merchandise that we didn't have growing up. Who wouldn't want a Superman T-shirt with a cape already stitched into the back of it? We're only allowed to dress up as Batman and Superman and Han Solo and Chewbacca during Halloween. Kids these days get to dress up as Disney princesses or whatever they want on a daily basis. So nerd culture is pop culture. And, just like I said, like the NFL markets to football fans, I'm just marketing to that core comic book fan, because one of the big misnomers I get in my business is either A, they hate us, meaning the comic book fan hates the big movie studio, or B, we have them already, which both of those things are wrong. If you reach out to your customers early on and say, I see you, they appreciate that. And, to assume that you have that customer already, you don't, because they can turn on you just as easily. They'll talk about you in the message boards, you can watch the video and all that other stuff. But if you just do a simple reach out, because you're already spending $100 million on a movie, it's not anything to take a sliver of that budget and throw it my way to talk directly to those comic book fans where they are and go, oh, wow, this is cool. give away like a special limited edition Mondo poster or a special branded bag or something when you go to the store on Wednesday to buy your comics or Saturday to play Magic the Gathering. And then and also, the clients pay me to pay the stores to talk about these properties.
Let's take a minute to focus on this. So what you're really doing is you're taking time to examine who the hardcore fan is, and you're not taking for granted that nerd is automatically going to be a fan because they're a nerd. And you're also accepting the fact that just because they're considered a nerd, the average American also is now considered a nerd because nerds are cool. Revenge of the Nerds had it right all the way along. It actually forecasted themselves correctly, right? This is what you're saying all the way around in a simple summed up version. Nerds have become cool,
totally.
And you can't overtake the fact that they're automatically going to be there for you, that they're going to set the market only if you engage them correctly.
Yeah, I mean, the same thing is happening in the music space with these YouTube stars. I mean, the reason why those YouTube stars are so big is because they actually have a connection with their fans, or the fans feel like they're connecting with them. When YouTube first started doing branded licensed videos, the TV networks thought, oh, okay, we can just take the same stuff we put on TV, put it up on YouTube, and we'll get viewers. Not the case. What people didn't understand is like the networks and the big companies that were putting up videos on YouTube thought that like putting the video on YouTube was the end of the promotion. That's actually the beginning of the promotion. That's how YouTube stars came to be so big. Once the YouTube star put a video on YouTube, that was the beginning of the conversation. And because YouTube's metrics were so slow initially, you would find traction when people were talking about that video on Facebook or Twitter. And then, that's the thing. It's like the YouTube stars would point back to the YouTube video across all their socials to get it promoted and going. That's why when you see some 14-year-old kid who's posting a video get 1 million views in 24 hours, it's because he's built up his network and they know when to expect the video and they promote it properly. It's really crazy.
Let's talk about the future, because this is going to be an ongoing conversation, and we'd love to have you as an ongoing returning guest because there's a lot to digest for where you're going with this, and I don't want to overdo it. But let's talk about what couple of things you see coming technology-wise that people need to line up with sooner than later.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Straight up, more than anything, and a lot of folks may already know this, but for those that don't, Snapchat geofilters are the single most underused mobile marketing opportunity out there right now.
I heard this talked about at San Francisco Music Tech. It's a fascinating thing, right? If you're an advertiser, you buy into the concept through Snapchat of having a localized, specialized geotag for, say, Disneyland behind your Snapchat picture, or even your wedding or your band at that event, so people can not only take the picture, but they can tag it geo-targetedly with a special wraparound for that event, right? That's what you're talking about?
Exactly. They were initially created to celebrate fraternity houses, sorority houses, parties, events, weddings, stuff like that. And in fact, if you go to create a geofilter on Snapchat's desktop, it's a very loose thing. It's not very business-oriented right now. I mean, right now, I can log on to Snapchat's geofilter portal and grab and create a geofilter for the Troubadour and pay a whopping $5 for 4 hours. So if I know that a certain band is going to be playing and I want to affiliate myself with that band as a brand, I can create a geofilter that lines up over the Troubadour so that when they take a picture of that band on stage and they're swiping those filters for the right one, they'll see 7-Up, Sprite, Mountain Dew, 7-Eleven, Gillette, Red Bull, whatever it is. And it's only $5 right now.
It can be a lot more expensive, say, if you're the Dodgers and you're playing to a bigger baseball field of people of 50,000. Like, they've got this metrics figured out.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah, I mean, the way that works, too, is, for some reason, no matter what time of day, if you try and put a geofilter over Staples Center, it's always going to be $1,000, whether or not anybody's playing there at all. It's just how it is. If there's a special event at Staples Center, or if there's a special event in general, Snapchat may have already held on to all that inventory to sell directly to their larger brand clients. Like, you're not going to be able to hijack Coachella and put on the, "Hi, this is Scott" geofilter, because Snapchat recognizes that as premium content and will take that and sell that to their own brand sponsors. But for the most part, on a daily basis, like, you can go to any club, and a lot of labels do these already, but you have to decide whether it's the responsibility of the label, the manager, the promoter, whomever, to have that filter lining up during that concert. But there are a lot of caveats associated with it. You can't use a call to action. You can't use hashtags. You can't use a website or any personal identifying information. And your metrics are very limited. And there's no targeting. So
it's like finding an Easter egg in the actual world. Like going, it's hidden. You got to be cool enough to know.
Exactly.
And cool enough by being nerdy enough. So bringing it all the way around full circle. Nerdy is cool.
Exactly. And so the usage rates aren't that big. And if your brand or event doesn't line up with Snapchat's main user base, you're not going to get a lot of impressions on it. And it's purely impression. There's no click-through. You can't target by demographic. You can't target by age, sex, interest, or anything like that. It's purely geo. And the metrics are pretty limited. You just get to see how many people use it, how many people viewed it overall. But you know what? I could have gotten the forum the other night for Kanye, $80. I mean, come on. As a brand, who wouldn't spend $80 to potentially, be in a geo filter that may be used among 2,000 of those 20,000 people at that show? It's crazy.
Yeah, next time you do it, grab it for Promoter 101. We'll write the check. What the hell?
And the thing is, it's like, I think you can only book 30 days in advance. And if that inventory is sold out, then you can't get it. There's no way to claim it if it's yours, if it's already taken. There's all these other things that go with it that Snapchat will figure out as they grow into a business. In fact, they just announced last week that they're partnering with Foursquare to use Foursquare's API and their data to do more targeted geo filters. Because right now, the minimum size geo filter is 20,000 square feet, which is pretty huge. But now, if they're using Foursquare's API, they could probably narrow down that geo filter to 5,000 or 2,000 square feet. So it lines up more closely with your club, your bar, your restaurant, your party, whatever it is. I mean, there's something to be said about the runoff effect, about your geo filter being seen outside of your space. But it really is, like, if somebody's there at your event, you want them. And plus, it's a lot easier to swipe a geo filter and put it on there, to have that FOMO, to have that fear of missing out, instead of typing out, yay, I'm at the Blink-182 secret show at the Troubadour tonight. It's just like, boom. So it's Blink-182, it's K-Rock, May 28th, 2017, whatever it is. It's just there. Boom. You've got a history of that moment. You've got a little thing that you can, like, share out to all your friends. So, yeah, I think that from a branding perspective, the Snapchat geo filters is the single largest untapped opportunity.
I want to thank you, Scott, for taking time and talking to us about the future of where technology is going and how the music business and how the nerds are going to conquer the world. And I hope you'll come back and talk to us again.
Totally.
To my favorite Jew-fro in the world. Thank you, Mr. Scott Perry, for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Dan. Appreciate it, man.
Thanks for tuning in to episode 8 of Promoter 101. I want to give a special thanks to our friend and guest, Mr. Dave Brooks of Amplify Magazine. If you're not already, please become a member of Amplify Magazine. Dave does some absolutely phenomenal reporting, breaking some of the industry's most important stories. You can follow Dave at Real Dave Brooks and follow at Amp the Mag.
And you can follow Luke at W. Luke Pierce and me at The Jew for following ramblings of Twitter at Promoters101. Keep the S in there at Promoters101.
And be sure to subscribe to Promoter 101 wherever you listen to podcasts. If you liked our stuff, or even if you hated it, drop us a review. We want to know what you think.
That's it for episode 8 of Promoter 101. This coming week, you can catch Luke and I at Aspen Live Music Conference at the Limelight Hotel in Aspen, where we'll be promoting and recording Promoter 101's upcoming episode with special guests Amy Morrison of AEG, Jamie Loeb of Niederlander, and my own Aaron Reynolds of Aaronporium Concerts, diving deep into marketing from the clubs to the stadiums. Should be a really good time because Amy does the Stones for the entire world. She's a marketing genius and my first boss, so that should be a good time, Luke.
Really, really looking forward to the snow, the company, the podcast. Everything about Aspen sounds amazing. Hopefully we'll see some of you out there.
And then following up on that, the following week we'll have that Jay Massiano interview that I'll be also doing from Aspen next week. So a great couple weeks coming up, and we'll see you at Polestar Live the weeks following that. Have a great holiday, everyone.
Cheers.